Welcome to Porch Play Chat, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA-USA. Porch Play Chats are sort of very informal conversations on topics of play with experts who are passionate about a particular topic. And so today on the porch with me, I'm Deb Lawrence, president of IPA-USA. Good morning or afternoon or wherever you are. And with me on the porch is Lisa Murphy.
Good morning.
Good morning. Lisa is one of our board members, and of course, all of you who know Lisa know she's passionate about play. Also with us is Ross Thompson. Good morning, Ross, or whatever time it is, wherever you are.
Good morning, everybody.
And so a little bit about Ross to kind of get us started. Ross is a longtime play advocate. He's also an avid Dungeons and Dragons player, and my husband is too, and so is my stepson. He's the co-host of a podcast, Teaching with the Body and Mind. And you've met Mike Huber, who's his other co-host on that program. And so one of the things that I think is really important about Ross's topic is something that I think teachers ask themselves every day when it comes to rough and tumble play or risky play in a classroom. And so the title of Ross's, which is what started me off with this question, the title is Figuring Out Ways to Say Yes to Big Body, Rough and Tumble, and Risky Play. And it doesn't mean Wrestlemania on Monday morning. So I think that's what we pictured. Mm-hmm. And so my question to Ross is, how do we avoid it looking like Wrestlemania on Monday morning?
Oh, there's so many ways, but I think, to maybe derail the question right away is that it also could look like WrestleMania on Monday. But the really important thing, I think, just to start off is that you have to check in with yourself as the teacher, as the person overlooking the classroom. What's your own personal comfort level? Mm-hmm. Because we know that there's great benefits to rough and tumble play, to big body play, to movement. But I think, and I'll take this right from Lisa's presentations that I've seen, the 10-day rule being in effect, that if you go to a conference and you see somebody say, hey, rough and tumble play is a really great idea. It's going to be all these benefits for motor and social, emotional, and, it does link to cognitive. It is creative. You get so excited to hear about these ways to incorporate it, but you yourself haven't reflected on where you're at or how to really do it. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you're like, we're going to wrestle on Monday. Mm-hmm. And then you get into it and you're like, oh no, I have no idea how to frame this. I have no idea how to stop this. And I think that's one of the things that often, there's many ways to take it, but I think there's some people who just want to jump right in and go for it and haven't really thought of it and then realize they're in the soup. Once they're in, the soup's already boiling. Mm-hmm. There's others who are like, nope, that's just not me. And that's never going to be anything I'm going to be comfortable with. And so I think it's recognizing that rough and tumble play isn't always wrestling. Mm-hmm. But big body play also, it's to kind of look at that, the idea that big body play includes rough and tumble play, but rough and tumble play isn't always big body play, and that risky play can come in lots of different ways. So it's kind of that a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square kind of situation. Mm-hmm. But I think it's, to say yes, to learn, as we're kind of getting into that topic, is, looking at the benefits. We know that for motor support, it's going to be huge for actually, learning, understanding your body's own strength, your own kind of comfort levels with how physical you want to be or can be, learning how to read social cues or facial expressions and body language, learning how to regulate your own excitement, learning how to regulate your own emotions of being frustrated or scared. Because, if you are going to do wrestling, you got to know how to say, well, this is too much. I can't, I'm done. Also being able to hear somebody say that and say, I'm so excited, I want to keep playing, and having that, ability to say, whoa, and step back.
I'm going to interrupt you, Ross, for one quick second, because I know that I've been guilty before of assuming that everybody understands the idea of play face and what it looks like. So can you go back to that a little bit with the reading of the social cues and talk a little bit about play face?
Yeah. As I said, I think we kind of went over, we were just talking about how to not make it look like WrestleMania. And we're talking all about wrestling right now. But I think it's one that is a really great indicator or kind of example of how to read play face. And with the topic of wrestling, when I get started to do that in the classroom, we have a mat, we have a designated space in the classroom where this is going to happen. It's not something that happens anywhere throughout the classroom. It's also not a free-for-all where anybody can jump in and hogpile on top of other people. There's an adult there. They have to be, we talk about the rules of how it's, 2 people at a time. You need to ask each other before we start to say, are you ready to play? Yes. And then they ask back, are you ready to play? Yes. Now we can start. But helping, and that's where there's a lot of coaching in these early years to say, oh, wait, stop. I can see that, Jonathan doesn't want to, his face is showing me he doesn't want to keep playing. Yeah. Or, Maggie, you're so excited. I can see that you're not able to stop. I can see your face is telling me that you're almost getting mad because your teeth are clenched and your brow is now, and it might be giving them facial, giving them the language. It might be having a mirror over there to say, wow, look, this is what your face looked like. How does that look? You might be the mirror yourself. I noticed your face was like this, or it was, up and your eyebrows were up and you were laughing. Oh, that seemed like it was a lot of fun. But then, that's the same we do for children with learning how to read, learning how to use other tools. That we're going to model and be there to help them gain an understanding, to go, wow, when you pushed that hard, that got scary for your playmate. So how do you, let's stop, let's take a break, let's watch this other group wrestle and let's see what they do. So I think there's that idea of helping children, as we do with any other skill.
You have to learn how to do it, right?
You have to learn how to do it, and you have to learn how to do it through actually doing it. To sit there and just have children watch YouTube videos, or to sit there and only watch their classmates do it and say, okay, well, now you can try, and expect that they're going to get it right the first time.
Right.
There's no way to have that be a realistic expectation for success. So I think that's where it goes back. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, already, Ross, I can feel teachers feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a designated space.
Designated space.
There's an adult there.
Yeah.
There's only 2 children at a time.
Yep.
Everybody has to agree they're ready to play.
Yep.
And the adult is there to help interpret and the boundaries, and also to set some boundaries without restricting it unless they need to, right?
Yep.
Already I can feel teachers feeling better.
Right. That's the important part, is to be able to check in. That's where we talked about in the beginning. So you got to check in with yourself to really go, hey, am I comfortable with this? Mm-hmm. And if wrestling play and that kind of thing, it's not something you did when you were growing up, or it's not something that you really feel comfortable with now, step back and start with doing yoga. Do some body posturing game where you do kind of a freeze, where you have a whiteboard and you draw a shape or like a stick figure body shape, and you turn it around, make this one. And then you turn it back around and the music goes and you draw a new shape, and then see if children can match, the body shapes. Or it could be, my class loved to reenact the song Scamper, Little Mouse from Hap Palmer. They wanted to go, they got chairs out and they went under the tables. They made a mouse house where the mice could go back to, but there was ways to do that big body and physical play that didn't always only mean one-on-one wrestling combat. And I think there's that piece. There's also the piece that I'm comfortable with it, but what's my co-teacher going to think? Or what are the parents going to think? And so being communicative about, right before it even starts, I'll send information home to families, or we do a parent talk to say, here's the value of this, and to think about what that involves. What are the benefits of this kind of play? But again, not to only focus on wrestling, but to look at just risky play in general. Mm-hmm. The idea of, here's the benefits. The children are going to gain confidence. They're going to have real life problem solving skills that have to happen. They have to, again, check in with themselves. What's my limit? What am I comfortable with? Do I want to do this? And if I don't, I can say no, and I don't have to play in the game.
Yeah, the freely chosen piece was always, I think that's what turned me from the shut it down, no way, You know, I think there is an evolution for sure of acceptance. And I think out the gate, a lot of teachers initially are like, no, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. Yep. But then the more you learn about it, right, you learn that there's actual benefits. It isn't just a chaotic beat 'em up, rock 'em, sock 'em, Wrestlemania, and you start to let a little bit of it in, right? You start allowing it with limits a little bit. But then, sorry, I totally just lost my train of thought the free to quit when I'm done piece. Yep. That was what completely sold me. Because if you don't want, nobody's making you come and wrestle on the mat. Nobody's making you do this. Right. So if you're not wanting to do it, you go find something else to do. Right. And that was when I was like, oh, why are we treating this really any different than any other play? And then that's the whole adult moral value piece that I think has to be, one, examined, and two, put on the shelf. Right. And exactly. And with there's an example that I've used a number of times in my own presentations, but there was a year where I had a very busy group, we'll say. They were very high energy. And this was a group that was also very kinesthetic. They needed physical contact. I mean, we couldn't sit at group without 2 or 3 just rolling on top of each other. And, you know, there's that decision as a teacher. I could just fight this and every day, nope, you need to be 2 feet apart, stay on your carpet square, or but they loved each other so much that they just had to be rolling around. And we're not going to stop that at home when you're with mom and dad to say, nope, this isn't hugging time. This is hugging time is only before bedtime and when I leave for work. Of course, there's times where, okay, yeah, we do have to sit down and, we'll save that for later, but there are times, so where am I going with that? Oh, so there was a group that wanted to wrestle all the time. And I had a boy who really had some behavior issues related to getting angry very quickly, resulting to kind of physical force when he was upset. And it was his own means of, he was trying to figure out strategies to do otherwise. One of his best friend kind of playmates was a girl who was the opposite of his style, and they would counter a lot. But when they would play in the Legos or the blocks or at the sand table or dramatic play, it could be beautiful to watch them interact, but he would get very physical very quickly, and it made her really uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So we brought in wrestling so he could really start learning how to regulate those things. Like, oh, I can see, and I would wrestle him. I often would choose him as my partner because I knew that other children weren't going to be able to necessarily understand why he was getting so physical or why sometimes he would get mad. And so we would wrestle and I would be the model, say, oh, and I could just hold him and say, okay, now it's time to stop. I said stop. And or I would wrestle and I might pin him to the ground and then he would say, oh, I say, oh, you said stop. Now I'm going to back up. And so he got to really understand he felt what that control started to feel like. This is how I regulate that. But all the time, his good friend would watch every day. Anytime we were wrestling, the invitation was there. Hey, do you want to come and wrestle? Nope, I just want to watch. And it was about 6 months later where she finally felt ready to jump in. And I said, who do you want to wrestle? I want to wrestle him. And mind you, their stature was several inches to already a foot apart only in early childhood. And she got pinned right away. But he helped her up. They shook hands. They said, good game. And that was the first thing that she told her parents when she got picked up was, I wrestled today. And she was so proud of herself. And that idea, again, that underlying confidence that comes when you succeed in this risky play, when you do something that scares you, we have that as well as adults, whether that's public speaking, whether that's being successful at making a new wood bench, whether that's conquering the dragon at the end of the dungeon, that your team has come together, that you have that feeling of joy that comes from it, but also that, hey, I can do this. And that's really what is backing a lot of this. The big body. I also want to remind everybody watching that the piece of standing on the sidelines and observing is just as important. I think often we will, just because we're human, we'll get distracted with the actual players of the game and we forget that the bystanders are playing their own role metaphorically within that same drama. And it, you know, obviously she was watching, she was learning, she was listening, she was building up that comfort. She didn't necessarily need that, the physical process of that, but more of, I call it that side coaching. And even what you said, Ross, about I'm putting my hands on you because I'm done, you know, like you're giving the language to the actual physicalness too, which I definitely believe increases the child's ability to self-regulate.
Well, and this is also that idea of, I've had conversations about how do you teach consent in early childhood, and this is that foundational stepping stone where I said stop. That means you have to stop, and if you can't stop, I'm going to help you right now. Just slow down. Let's take that water break. Let's you sit in my lap so you can still have that pressure if you need some more. But then we're going to watch some other people until you feel you're ready to try again. But this is, you know, that discussion of what words really mean, and words are really important. So if you're someone saying stop, if someone's saying no, someone's saying I'm scared, someone's saying I'm so excited to see you, that children have those realistic ways. Because I think it's, you know, even with nap time, I would always ask anybody that I sit down next to and say, do you want me to rub your back right now? I know you need me to rub your back right now because I want you to go to sleep. And I know that's going to help you start to slow down. But if you're saying no, I'm going to respect that. But I might say, wow, do you want me to just hold your back, just press down a little bit to that? Would that help you kind of feel more calm? But we're going to honor that, because I think there's that idea that if we're expecting children and then young adults to start listening to each other and consenting to what other people are saying, well, why would we not honor that when
just because they're 3?
Right. No, because I know better. Or that, no, come give grandma a kiss. Well, I don't want to give grandma a kiss. No, you have to, because this is what you have to do. Well, how could we be more respectful and maybe give choices of something else, a way to say hi to grandma?
So Ross, I really love how you brought in that girl who was sort of a sit and watcher, right? I'm going to sit and watch how this works, and I'm going to build up my confidence until I'm ready to take a risk.
Yep.
And I really like how it is respectful. I mean, as a teacher, we're always helping children resolve conflicts, right? You know, what that face, it looks like you're really angry. And what happened? What made you so angry? And you know, and they'll point and they'll yell and they'll scream, but you're being respectful and you're helping them sort of take a deep breath and calm down and work through the situation when there might be high emotions on both sides.
Right.
So this is just another way to help children get that understanding of someone else's feelings, to develop empathy, to recognize those facial expressions, and to know when to stop, right? So that, I think, is the beauty of it. And, you know, one of the questions I was going to ask is rough and tumble play just for boys. So is it, you brought in one girl, have you ever had 2 girls wrestle?
No, that's against the rules. We can never have 2 of the same gender ever wrestling. It always has to be. No, of course. And that actually would be how it would start sometimes. Again, with wrestling, that often dyads who are already really good friends would want to try it out. And that's where it would start. But then sometimes it would start with, all right, you two, you two, you two, you two. And I might select the pairs because I know that this group's going to work better together, or that they're a little more evenly matched, especially in the beginning. You know, I've had a child who was nearly 5 feet tall in preschool. He was up to my shoulder. Now, I'm not a very big guy, but at 5'8", if you have a 5-year-old who's at your shoulder at that time, he was the Great Dane that would just run through the room. And that, oddly enough, one of his great wrestling partners was one of the smallest kids. And it was just bouncing off him when they would run. But what a great way to help my bigger child learn about how strong he really is. And that if he wants these games to continue, I can't play as rough as I can. I could be a lot stronger with my mom and my dad because they, you know, that works. But when I'm playing with my other good friend who's really small, I need to dial it back in order to make it still be fun so people don't get hurt. But again, it's that real recognition of force you know, in order to know what force is for children or what strength is, you have to actually use it and put it into place.
Yeah.
So for the girls, starting off, but then there'd be a time where I would then, after we've done this game enough, all right, who do you want? You know, each person would get to pick each round, and it might be the same person, it might be different. But the invitation is always there for anybody who wants to. And Lisa, as you brought up before, that idea of the spectator is someone who is going to be really important to include, because it took that child 6 months to watch and then finally feel comfortable. But if I would have said, nope, it's your turn now, you have to do it today, she's not coming back.
No.
And she might then school becomes an unsafe place, or becomes a place that doesn't bring joy as much as it used to, because they make me do things I don't want to do, or they put me in positions that don't feel safe or don't feel good to me. Well, that's one of the cardinal sins of, you know, an early childhood programs. We want it to always feel loving, safe, and honoring who you are. So I think the idea that, I mean, think back, the idea going back to your question, Deb, about is it for boys or is it for think back to your childhoods. You know, were you one who climbing trees, running up and down the hills? Were you someone who was more interested in books and kind of being more quiet and in the back seat of, you know, the big rough and tumble play? Were you, you know, and I think that's going to be the bigger indicator of the need for it, because so many of us were active. And to quote one of my other co-hosts, Tom Bedard, from one of our recent podcast episodes, we talked about how the body is, you know, a thinking tool. Mm-hmm. And that we know that the body has to be active or participatory in learning for young children, not just motorically, but, you know, that's where your social emotional regulations go. That's where your cognitive development is becoming to make sense, because your body is the vehicle to help bring those concrete to abstract understandings to life. You have to touch and feel and play and do and knock down and restack and count over and over. But when it is in play, that's where children are just thriving and flourishing in the retention and new application of new information.
So Ross, I think what you've done for us is you've brought, and I don't want to say structure, but you've brought some,
maybe like a plan.
A plan, yeah, I like the plan better than structure, because I'm afraid teachers would then try to regulate, right, instead of facilitate. Yeah, let's move away from control. And so what you've done is you've given us some tips. You've talked to us about the importance. You've given us some strategies that we can use as teachers begin to feel more comfortable with the idea of not only rough and tumble play, but even wrestling in the classroom. So one of the things I'd like you to talk about is it a daily thing? I mean, we're over on the mat, right? Is it every day? Is it when you notice that children might need it? Is it organic?
Yes, and yes, right?
You just added 3 more yeses to what I was going to say. I was going to say yes. All of those things.
All of those things. So I think that's going to be helpful to those who are watching to understand that it's not just a guy thing, right? Yeah. And it's not something they need to be fearful of, but they also need to approach it in a way that helps children be successful and helps you feel comfortable with that experience for kids, because it is so important.
Absolutely. It's that checking in of yourself, to be honest about where you're at, and that you don't have, that's where like the title, it doesn't mean Wrestlemania Monday morning, is because you can't just jump right in if you haven't checked in with yourself. If you were the child who wanted to just sit back and read books, or kind of be out just dragging your stick in the sandbox while the rest are playing capture the flag, or the sand is lava and they're tackling and running and chasing, and that wasn't your thing, well, then really think about, are you the person who should be the one facilitating these bigger, riskier play opportunities?
So I like that, Ross. I've never stopped to think about that, like the delegation of it. Like it doesn't need to be a no-no just because I don't like it, but who might we have on the staff that I can kind of tap in to, so I don't have to say no to this.
Right.
If that allows me to say, yes, I like that.
And then to use the kind of it as the analogy, it's like our children who wrestling and watching for 6 months, if you've got the teacher who's really comfortable with that, well, then maybe you can watch, or you can talk with them and say, tell me more about how you do this. What are the rules? How do you establish the rules with that game? Mm-hmm. And I also know that we're getting close, and a 25 to 30 minute conversation is not nearly enough to tackle all of these things. So, I mean, there's some books and resources that I would recommend, especially in a time when people are still maybe at home more, or just ways to get comfortable with this, because there's so many articles and books and things available to help give you specific games to play, different strategies to use, or ways to check in.
So Ross, here's what I'm going to ask you to do.
Yeah.
What we've been doing when we post these Porch Play Chats on our YouTube channels, we say, whoever the speaker was has provided some additional resources that will help you. So can you email me a list of those resources and where they could get them? Maybe if there's articles, then maybe a link to the article, and I'll stick that into the introduction of the Porch Play Chat on YouTube, because that's where they're released.
Absolutely.
So that would be fabulous. So I want to thank Ross for joining us. And for more information on Porch Play Chats and more information on IPA-USA, please visit our website at IPA-USA.org. There's lots of stuff there. You can access our YouTube channel, which is where these Porch Play Chats will be released. You can access our Facebook page, which will also have a link to the Porch Play Chat. You can read all about the information that we have on recess and the importance of playgrounds and our policy briefs. And so we hope you'll join us. And thanks again, Ross, for coming and talking to us for a very short period of time. But oh my goodness, you've given people tons of strategies, and I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, and be well, everybody.
You too.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you, Ross.
Nice to see you.
Here we